Today we've got a 160cc Chinese pit bike. The customers brought it to us because the kickstart is seized, it doesn't go down. There's a couple of things that it could be. It could be that the barrel and the piston is seized. We don't know really until we take it apart. The customer said that they have worked on the bike and now it turned over a couple of times, but now it won't. So we need to find out what's wrong with it and fix it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the timing, because if the piston is coming up and the timing's wrong, then it could be hitting on the valves and that could stop it. So that's what we're going to check first. We need to remove this side cover. Yes, I've already taken the bolts out, and we need to take this cover off, which I've already loosened these bolts off. Make it quicker for the video. Looking at the bike now, I can't really turn it over with the kickstart to check the timing. So what I found is that I can turn the flywheel here, but the chain isn't turning there, as you can see. It looks like something is wrong behind the stator plate where the chain goes onto the sprocket on the crank. So we're going to take the flywheel off and the stator plate, and we're going to see what's happening to the chain. I've tipped the bike on the side, so we don't need to drain the oil out, so it should be a minimal loss of oil, and we'll take it off and see what we have. I can spin this nut off with my torque gun. There we are. You put that into to the side, into a box. I'm going to save all the bits off the bike in a box, and then we know all the parts that's come off the bike, they all got to go back in. No bolts left over. We take the flywheel off with our flywheel puller. It's a left-hand thread, so we're going to screw that in there, like so, as far in as possible, so that we don't strip any threads. We want to put it in as far as we possibly can. That should be plenty. It's quite difficult actually for me to do this off with two spanners and try and hold it as well, so I'm going to do it with the torque gun. It's just as easy with two spanners, just if you haven't got a torque gun. And there we are. Our flywheel's off in the box. Now we need to take off our stator plate. As I showed in the previous video, we're going to take these two screws out now with the impact driver. They come out relatively easy then. For some parts of the video I need to switch hands free so that I can use both hands. So we're going to take these screws out. There we are, one. There's the second one loosened off. So I'm going to take these two screws out. There we go. Now I just need to lever this stator plate off. So I'm just going to gently lift it there with the screwdriver and it'll come off. Pull this rubber out and it'll come out the way for us to see what exactly what's happening with this chain. And as you can see, the chain isn't on the sprocket. The chain here is supposed to be on the sprocket there, and when they rebuilt it, they couldn't have checked that it's on the bottom sprocket. So, but at least that shows us what, well, at least one of the problems are. So it could be a case now where if we put this chain back on and we put the timing right, then the bike might be okay. We're not going to know otherwise. Oh, there we are. So the top end has come loose now. So it was holding the valves down. So if we put the timing correct now on the bottom end and the top end, then hopefully this bike will be okay. The piston was moving up and down when I turned the flywheel. So we'll put the chain back on the bottom sprocket and see what we get. So the first thing I'm going to do to get the timing back correct on the bike is I'm going to take this chain tensioner off. Before I take the chain tensioner out though, it's always a good idea to loosen off the tensioning bolt in the middle, because when you've got the chain tensioner off in your hand, it's quite difficult to undo this bolt in the middle. So if you undo it before you take it off, and I find that's always a lot easier. So then we're gonna undo these two 8mm bolts either side. So there's one there and the one at the back. We're going to take this off to release any tension on the chain, and then we're going to set the time. So there's our chain tensioner removed. We're going to put that as a side. Now to find top dead center on the actual bottom end. It's quite easy to turn the bottom end over. It's easier to turn the bottom end over with the flywheel. I've put the bottom end timing right. It's at top dead center now. So this T mark, that groove there, has to be in line with the groove at the top there. And I've checked this now. I've put a round ended Allen key down the bow and checked that the piston is at top dead center. So I know this mark is top dead center on the bottom end. Now I need to find top dead center, or find out where the cam needs to be for that to be correct. According to the book, I need to take off this sprocket with these two bolts here, and there is a triangle mark on the casing, and then there's a mark on the camshaft underneath that lines up with it apparently. So we need to take this off and have a look. I'm going to whiz these two bolts off now with a torque gun. There's one and there's the other. So then if we lift this sprocket up out of the way a minute, and then we're looking for a mark. That was sharp. We're looking for a mark that lines up with this arrow here. As you can see, they've put this sprocket on the wrong way round, so the marks are actually on the back. So okay, so we can put this back on, and then we can line up the marks to the arrow, from this arrow to the marks on here, and then the engine will be timed up. as you can see it a bit clearer here, this arrow here has to line up with this mark on the sprocket. So we are going to put the chain on here and on the bottom. And we're going to put the chain on the bottom end on this sprocket here, and then we're going to make sure that the timing is correct. So the chain goes on the bottom sprocket very easily. So the chain is on the bottom sprocket there. So then now we need to wrap the chain around the top sprocket, but with the top sprocket in the correct position. So we need to take the sprocket off, this here, we need to pull it off, we need to put it in the chain, and then we need to stretch it back to the correct position. Okay, so if I take this sprocket off here and put it in the chain, like so, and then put it on, as you can see that mark doesn't line up with that triangle, so just need to move the sprocket around until it's pointing in the right direction. So it can be a bit of trial and error until you get it exactly right. If you put your finger, you can't do it that way. If you push down there to keep the chain tight, and then you'll see if it marks up, if it lines up or not. So this one still one tooth out. So if I move it around one tooth to there, tighten the chain, it hasn't moved. There's something what you can do now. What you can do if you only want to move it one tooth, you can put a mark on there and move the chain and move the sprocket around one, so this not in line, and then you know that you've moved it. Okay, so we do that, then we know that we've moved it by one tooth. So if we pull the chain tight there, it seems to be there is past the triangle, and the next one round is past the triangle this way. So what I do now is I'll put the flywheel on and I'll just make sure that the piston is at top dead center. So I need to put my little Allen key down the piston bow and check that it's all still in line. Okay, so with my round headed Allen key, I'm just going to put that in the piston bore. And I'm going to move the piston up and down until the piston is right at the top dead center. Now, as you can see, that mark is exactly in line with the triangle, and this mark here to the casing is a tiny bit off, but I know that that piston is exactly at the top, so the timing now between the top and the bottom is correct. So now it's just a matter of putting the bolts back in with it as it is, so that the timing stays as it is. We need to put these bolts in the cam to stop this from moving. So if we turn the cam there so the holes line up, and then we're going to put our bolts in there to stop that from moving. And I'm going to whiz those in with my torque gun. It is the best way to do it, but you've got to be very careful not to strip the threads. So there we are. We're just going to check everything again, check everything lines up. And everything does. Now we're going to bolt our cam chain tensioner back in. So you need to remove this bolt in the centre. As you can see, it's easy to remove because we've already loosened it off. You need to then depress this little spring-loaded lever and push that back, and then we can bolt that back in to the bike. And we need to push this spring down into the cam chain tensioner, and then we need to put this bolt in. There's a little O-ring on here that sits in there to stop it from leaking, so make sure that the O-ring's in place. So that little shaft there fits over the top of the spring. So when you put it in, it should all tighten up. There we are. So there we go, there's our cam chain tensioner fitted. There we go. And now we should be able to turn the bike over without anything jamming. And now I'm going to refit the stator plate. Should just put it back from whence it came. There we go. And put our 2 screws in. Then we refit the flywheel, making sure that the Woodruff key lines up with the slot in the flywheel. And we're going to bolt that back in. The easiest way to do it again is with our torque gun. Just make sure you don't strip the threads on the crank, so you don't need to give it full power. So this one's just on 3 on the torque settings, but don't over tighten it. Okay, so now we can put this cover on to stop, so that we don't get oil everywhere. And now I'm going to stand the bike back up straight and kick it over and see if everything turns over as it should. After doing the work that we've done, setting the timing right, I've tried to kick the bike over and it still won't turn over. It looks as if when they set it up and the timing was incorrect, they've actually bent one of the valves, because as you can see, this top valve is stuck in. So that means that the head needs to come off and we need to look at the valves, which is disappointing really, because I thought this would be fixed. I'll cover removing the head and setting up the valves in another video. I hope that this video helps you when you're trying to set your timing up on one of these bikes. Thanks very much for watching, and please, if you like what you see, subscribe.